As the world was confronted with COVID-19 pandemic, many states had advised its citizens to stay at home or quarantine. Such measures assumed that everyone has a home, including access to water, sanitation, and food, as well as the ability to work from home and to draw on their savings in period of crisis. So what lessons have we learned from the response to COVID-19? One major lesson learned from the response to COVID-19 is that we cannot continue to do things the same way we are used to. There is now a call for new narratives and new ways of working by all. Efforts should be intensified to urgently accelerate the implementation of the SDGs. Another lesson we've learned from this pandemic is the urgent need for adequate housing. The pandemic made visible the precariousness and fragility of housing conditions for many poor and lower income inhabitants who lived in inadequate homes, including slums and squatter settlements. The homeless persons had nowhere to isolate or self-quarantine themselves. Most of them were left on the streets, and we all know what happened to some of them. Moving forward, another lesson that I want us to look at is the case of violence against women. And at this point, we need to critically ask ourselves this question: why do women still suffer violence, despite all the conventions like CEDAW and other protocols and instruments targeting violence against women? Could it be that we actually need more policies, or do we need actions to stop this violence? Going by our experience during the COVID-19 pandemic, again, what new resources or measures should we have put in place to ensure that women and girls were protected from violence during this pandemic? Now, moving on to effective policies for recovering from the crisis. It is very, very important that we remind ourselves at this juncture the issue of human rights to adequate housing. This rights, we can also agree that it's in the document of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which have been ratified by at least 152 state parties. Again, we must take note that the commodification of housing and land has perverse effects on the human right to adequate housing and access to land. Now, moving on to the effective policy on violence against women. Quickly, I want to state here that actions are of an urgent prerequisite to give some real meaning to all the numerous existing policies that we have. What I want to say here is that we need engendering legislation and improving the criminal justice system to become more responsive to acts of violence against women. Let me conclude by saying that if we must not leave anyone behind, particularly women who are already being left behind, strong efforts should be made by the states and all to end violence against women and girls. In addition, there should be parity political participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ofong. I'm very pleased to see that you emphasized housing and